equipe comprometida com o seu sucesso.
Bom dia, bom dia, bom dia. Estamos aqui de volta com mais um Entec Color Mix Especialidades. Hoje o dia é muito legal e muito especial, porque nós vamos falar de mais uma das joias da botânica africana. Essas joias têm feito muito sucesso no mercado brasileiro, temos muitos lançamentos de produtos para a felicidade geral de clientes e do mercado de uma maneira geral, muitos lançamentos com essas especialidades e com esses ativos vegetais muito especiais da botânica africana. E hoje, em especial, nós vamos falar do Ximenia Oil, um produto fantástico, estupendo, que o INRAN da Cupanda, que é a nossa especial distribuída desses materiais, desses ativos, vai apresentar para a gente com muito detalhe, com o apoio da Eliane. A Eliane é uma fã incondicional dessa linha de produtos e desse óleo em especial e vai detalhar isso para a gente. Estamos aqui com a família Color Mix de webinários, sempre com o apoio da Cida na tradução, então vocês podem abrir mão aí e escolher o áudio em inglês ou em português com a tradução simultânea da Cida. O evento vai estar sendo transmitido, como sempre, ao vivo pelo nosso canal do YouTube e também aqui pelo Zoom. Deixem as suas perguntas, tanto na área do Zoom de perguntas, como na área do canal de vídeo do YouTube, porque no final a Eli voltará conosco para fazer aquele bate-bola, aquele talk show com o INRAN e trazer as melhores explicações e deixar tudo muito claro sobre essa riqueza, sobre esse espetacular ativo que tem propriedades espetaculares. Muito bom dia para todos, muito obrigado pelo apoio de sempre. Esse é um compromisso que a gente seguirá sempre com vocês de compartilhamento de conhecimento. Eli, muito bem-vinda, muito bom dia, um abraço grande para o INRAN e que tenhamos uma excelente apresentação. Bem-vinda, Eli, um abraço a todos.
Bom dia, Abreu, bom dia a todos. Para a gente é sempre uma alegria, uma satisfação, né, a cada encontro, a cada Entec. E, como disse o Abreu, uma oportunidade na troca e de aprendizado, né? Hoje estou feliz, né? Fico feliz mesmo, me apaixono pelos ativos e esse é meu novo amor, né? O Ximenia Oil é um óleo realmente muito especial. A gente vai estar conversando aqui, né? Um pouco sobre ele, né? Desvendando aí a sua composição. É uma joia rara mesmo, é uma especialidade em óleo vegetal. Então, vou convidar o Imran Mouten, da Cupanda, lá da África do Sul, desculpem, para subir aqui com a gente e a gente dar início a essa apresentação. Seja bem-vindo, Imran.
Good morning, Brazil. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, Eliane and Abreu. It's absolutely fantastic to be with you today. My name is Imran Moten. I'm the Managing Director of Cupanda. And as the two have mentioned, I'm here to present to you our rejuvenating Mideca Ximenia seed oil. Just before I get started, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. I think that should be okay. What I'd like to do today is present 4 topics with regards to our Mideca Ximenia seed oil. The first is to give you a very short overview of Cupanda, who we are and how we can support your product development needs going forward. Then I'd like to drill down into our Mideca Ximenia seed oil product itself, tell you about the product origin from a botanical historical context, as well as introduce you physically as much as I can and talk to you about the physio and chemical properties. I'd like to then hand over back to Eliane, who will talk you through some of the formulation aspects and the sensorial aspects of the oil. And then I'd like to finish off with giving you a very short overview of the supply chain that we established both from Africa across to Europe and then potentially out to Brazil. So Cupanda is a specialist producer of niche, high-value, esoteric botanical extracts of plant origins from Africa. We have a very distinctive value proposition where what we have defined as our goal is to help cosmetics companies to be able to deliver product differentiation in a fairly cluttered cosmetics industry, not only just in Brazil, but globally. And we do this by bringing a number of exotic oils to the market, baobab, moringa, Kalahari melon, manketia, just to name a few. Ximenia is an oil that we have recently launched. We have a number of aspects that really bring forward our oils to the market. One of those aspects is around having a very unique market position of a green natural ingredient portfolio, together with an exotic range, obviously stemming from Africa. From a green natural perspective, we use physical productions. We don't blend. What you see from nature, as per the picture, the graphic that you see on your slide up there, is really what we give you. The oils originate from Africa. We provide a story that really brings home what is the plant or the seed material, why it's relevant in African society, together with the name of the product. And as you've seen, Mideca Ximenia means to rejuvenate. We'll talk about that shortly. Another aspect is our portfolio is efficacy tested. And again, we'll deep dive into Ximenia and see how that's quite functional. But also there are a number of sensorial effects, formulation effects, which allow us to be able to position Ximenia as a multifunctional ingredient for a variety of cosmetics applications. We source all of our seeds from 7 different countries in Africa, which gives us a reliable, sustainable, and diversified sourcing base of our seed material. We also source our seed material in a very ethical and a very mature, transparent, traceable approach, which allows us to be able to communicate to you, the customer, specifically which districts from which countries our seeds have come, so as to ensure that there is environmental sustainability and viability going forward. It's a topic that's very near and dear to us. It's very important. Our oils are produced in Europe. Seeds are migrated from Africa across to Europe. We use very highly accredited production facilities that are ISO, HACCP, FSSC 22000 certified, halal, kosher, food grade facilities that have very high standards and allow us to be able to use our logistics base in Hamburg to be able to move our goods back and forth across production and then out to our global community. Given that our products are produced in Europe, they are required to meet European Commission standards, especially when it comes to contaminants and other nasties that are prevalent in offerings of perhaps some others. Finally, all of our oils are Cosmos approved. We have a number of oils that are organic certified or on the path to being organic certified. Our documentation is fairly extensive, and that's across our entire portfolio. What I'd like to be able to do is bring these points out and really resonate them through our Ximenia offering that we have established. And I'm really looking forward to taking questions at the end of the session today. So let's start with some botanical, historical, cultural context. In Africa, the Ximenia tree is recognized for its healing soul, stability, energy, rejuvenation, and reinvigoration. We've chosen the word Mideca, which comes from one of the languages close to one of our sourcing regions. The word Mideca in that local language means to rejuvenate, means to rebuild, to grow, to get more energy, bring more liveliness. And we've chosen this word because of its properties that I'll talk you through very shortly. From an historical context, the name Ximenia honors the Spanish monk Francisco Jimenez, who was very pertinent in biomedicinal works dating back to the 17th century. There are, of course, African names, but the common name that's reflected around and is well understood is indeed the Ximenia tree, the Ximenia fruit, and therefore the Ximenia oil. The tree itself is widely scattered through different parts of Africa, both north, south, and then across the continent itself. Geographically speaking, up in the north, you've got Senegal on the western side, across to Ethiopia in the northern half of Africa. And you will get clusters of Ximenia trees scattered southwards as far as Zimbabwe, which happens to be one of our primary locations for sourcing the Ximenia fruit and specifically the seeds. We often refer to the tree as a tree, but rather it's actually more of a shrub. It can only grow up to about 6 meters high. So it's not really a tree where you've got a long stem. You've got branch formations that go in very divergent different directions. And what's very fascinating about the tree or the shrub itself is that you've got very small flowers that really come out during the flowering season with a characteristic white, yellow, pink petal flowering process, which then eventually leads into the formation of the fruit. It's a very beautiful sight. Cultural folklore. This is obviously something that's very important to us. The Ximenia fruit has been coined the monkey plum from the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. They called it the monkey plum fruit because the tribesmen have seen monkeys really clamoring for the fruit, fighting amongst themselves for the delicious fruit, the pulp of the fruit, which is quite nutritious. And it's said that monkeys become very protective and hostile towards each other if you get one monkey or a baboon jumping from one tree to a tree that they shouldn't be on. So it's quite an interesting sight. I haven't seen it myself, but that is what I've been told. If I go back into the folklore and the traditional usage, village chiefs used to summon their local healers, especially when it was recognizable that there was a bad luck or curse on the village community, perhaps evil spirits that were plaguing the community in some way. Those traditional healers were brought up. What they are said to have done is use the leaves and bark, created a powdered concoction of the leaf and bark in a particular way. The healers would then create a raging fire and throw the powdered concoction of leaf and bark into the tree. The ensuing smoke would have to be inhaled by the elders and the leaders of the village, and that is said to have removed the evil spirits, curses, and bad luck. From a medicinal point of view, the tree is renowned to cure leprosy, diarrhea, insect stings, and is also an antidote for poison, poison bites from perhaps ants or other insects that may have harmed individuals. The fruit that you see in the very bottom is very, very rich in vitamin C. And the leaves that you can see on the picture on the left here are actually quite edible after thorough cooking. What is absolutely fantastic about this oil is that it has a natural, unique silicone-like feel that has impressed formulators from around the world. And we're starting to see very new, wondrous, interesting formulations being established by cosmetics formulators around the world. The unrefined oil, true to Kupanda form, is produced through cold pressing. We start with the seed and we cold press the oil at no more than 50 degrees Celsius to keep the nice phytosterols and the unique fatty chain, which I'll talk about very shortly, in place. The oil is, as I said, cold pressed and filtered. What we do is a physical refine of the oil to maintain the unique properties and balance the right approach when it comes to presenting this oil. As you can see in the picture, the oil can be a clear to a light yellow in colored oil. It's got a very characteristic yet pleasant odor, which, although still is there, we've minimized it to the best possible range so that we still maintain the relevant goodies, the phytosterols and the fatty acids within the oil. We haven't burnt off the oil to a level where the odor has been removed completely. But as I say, it's a very pleasant odor. As I mentioned earlier, perhaps the most interesting factor of the oil is a beautiful, a lovely texture, a relatively high viscosity, a silicone or a jelly-like feel. I have a sample of the oil in a bottle here, and I'm just going to bring it as close as I can to the camera so you can just see the viscosity. You can see that it's not a typical oil. You can see that it is fairly runny, but also fairly thick. Yeah. And as I've mentioned, it is something that a lot of formulators have been drawn to as part of the ability to extend their range, to be able to use natural ingredients, a natural oil with silicone jelly-like properties. As we all know, silicones are not in favor these days by consumers, and formulators are looking for alternatives. And we believe that this is a fantastic ingredient for you to consider. I'm going to talk you through the fatty acid and the phytosterol profile. But before I do, I think the key point that I'd like to raise is that through the production process, we have optimized this. And also our peroxide value and acid value are certainly fairly low to be able to ensure the integrity of cosmetic formulations that you produce going forward. It's a very high quality product. We've maintained our typical standards when we bring new oils to the market. As I mentioned earlier, it meets our green natural product offering. From an ISO 16128, we have a natural and organic index calculation of 1. Our current batch of our oil is Cosmos approved, but future batches will be organic certified. The product label is a product of France, even though the seeds originate from Africa, primarily Zimbabwe. And importantly, as I mentioned earlier, the oil meets very important European Commission standards on a variety of contaminants such as PAH, pesticides, heavy metals, aflatoxins. These are for us absolutely non-negotiable. As always, we have an extensive and full documentation surrounding the oil. And I think very importantly, what we have is our blockchain traceability. So what I mean by that is that we are able to maintain records at a district level in the source country, let's say Zimbabwe, of where the seeds have been collected, what batch they have been called in aggregate from an export point of view. We maintain records of our shipping, all of our logistics, customs clearance, whether it's from Africa or across into Europe. We then maintain the production, the cold pressing records of production. Then that moves across to the refining records. We're keeping batches all the way along. Samples go into the laboratory. We obviously keep records of what are the laboratory test results that we receive, all the way up until a product serial number, meaning each of our drums are individually labeled. And then we keep a record of which customer or which of our distributor has received which drum. If you put all of that together, I am able to tell you for a particular drum which district in Africa did those seeds come from, and I am able to tell you exactly how, step by step, each seed went from tree all the way into your factory. The final point with regards to product standards is that I can confirm that our Mideca Ximenia oil is China listed for those that you have markets in China. So that is certainly not a concern in any way. Let me move across into some of the chemical aspects of our Mideca Ximenia seed oil. I think the headline that I want to be able to take away for you is that Mideca Ximenia seed oil is indeed an active oil. It's rich in phytosterols and it contains a unique long-chain fatty acid profile that are not found in typical cosmetic oils. As a result, There are pertinent skincare applications around anti-inflammatory action, anti-pollution, skin barrier activity, and indeed microcirculation. How do we come up with those claims? Firstly, if you look at the phytosterol profile, you've got a very high concentration of beta-sitosterol, just around the 46% mark, beta-amarin, 25%. And the other interesting phytosterol as part of the profile is 5.2% lupiol. Lupiol obviously is not something that's found typically in cosmetic oils that are used in formulations. Those three particular phytosterols constitute roughly 80% of the total phytosterol profile. Though individually and also collectively, the three phytosterols that I've mentioned are known to have anti-inflammatory activity. And indeed, they also possess antimicrobial and bacterial effects individually as well. Beta-sitosterol is known to be effective against atopic dermatitis. And as you can see, it's in relatively high concentration, as I mentioned, 46.5%. It's that phytosterol profile that certainly gives the anti-inflammatory action as well as anti-pollution capabilities, for which I'll talk about in the next slides. Let me just go back. There we go. What you see up here is the fatty acid profile of our current batch in terms of the actual fatty acids, the concentrations. And what we've added on this particular slide are the cosmetics benefits that originate from academic literature. Obviously, the references have been made, and we can obviously provide that to you if required. Perhaps the two key points that I'd like to bring out, firstly around skin barrier activity. If you cast your eyes down the cosmetics benefits of the different fatty acid profiles, you'll see that skin barrier is mentioned on a number of occasions, whether it's stearic acid, linoleic fatty acid. We've got skin permeation under uric fatty acid. Lignoceric is another key one. Then we've got cirrhotic, ximenixic, etc. So the key point around skin barrier activity is pronounced across a number of fatty acids throughout the profile of the oil. What's also interesting is the long chain fatty acids starting from about lignoceric onwards, which makes up around 35%. And that is what constitutes the thickness that I describe on the oil. And this actually remains at reasonably low temperatures and also up to about 30-35 degrees. The final fatty acid that I think is worth pointing out in particular is the ximenixic, together with Ximenix fatty acids. Both of them are known for microcirculation, improvement of blood circulation, which is obviously a very key and important fatty acid and capability, whether it comes to anti-aging activity, although we haven't really called it anti-aging as yet because we haven't performed the testing accordingly, or for other kinds of applications like slimming products. So you can see the versatility of the oil. It's multifunctional. It's got a unique texture to it, and I think it's something that really it's worth getting your hands on to be able to feel and understand the hype that's been created as a result of the oil itself. We have performed efficacy testing on our Medica Ximenia seed oil, and in particular what we looked at was the anti-pollution effect measured by the protection against collagen breakdown at 2 and 5%. The summary of the results that I'll just give you right up front is that both at 2 and 5% concentrations, we found equal protection against collagen breakdown against a pollution mix. Whenever we perform efficacy testing, we do so in the context of a consumer or a formulator problem. In this case, we saw the effects of climate change that has led in some parts of the world, especially Asia and South America, to high levels of air pollution, which has been linked to a range of skin conditions, whether it be dull, oily, or dry skin, perhaps acne, dark spots, or even less bright skin. What we've done is we assess the protection of collagen degradation, MMP1 expression, on ex vivo skin explants. So this was done on an ex vivo basis rather than an in vivo basis, where we had skin explants exposed to a pollution mix for 5 days at room temperature. What we did was we created a formulation, a very simple formulation, at 2% and 5% concentrations of Myddeca Ximenia seed oil, and we exposed the skin explants to a pollutant mix, which we thought was fairly representative of what can be out there, all sorts of nasties, heavy metals, benzene, xylene, toluene, diesel, together with cigarette smoke. I'm sure you'll agree it's a fairly reflective pollutant mix. The results. So on the y-axis was a judgment scale of the protection against collagen breakdown from very weak up to very clear. On the y-axis was the time, T0 of unexposed, all the way across to T5, and T5 for unexposed to pollution and T5 to exposed. So in this case, given that we're looking at protection against collagen breakdown, the lower the tower, the better the protection. And as you can see, P1 and P2, P1 being 2% Myddeca Ximenia and P2 being 5% Myddeca Ximenia, equally were demonstratively positive when it came to collagen protection against collagen breakdown. What's the correct dosage? Obviously, somewhere between 2 and 5% would be the right concentration that you'd want to be using as part of your cosmetics formulation. Before I hand over, just some graphics that really show you the actual skin treatment and the impact. So we're looking at the 5-day exposure to the pollutant mix. This is the P1, P2, and you can see that compared to the untreated and the exposed, where you see certain red marks, and you can see a lot more of the round skin cells, P1 and P2 is relatively unscathed. The color is much lighter compared to the graphic up here. You can see a little bit of the effects, a little bit of redness here, but certainly significantly less than the vehicle or the exposed untreated control. So I think it shows that there is absolute activity when it comes to anti-pollution capabilities, and as I described in the slide 2 earlier, it is largely down to the phytosterols, but certainly also the unique fatty acid profile and the long chain fatty acids that are prevalent in our Myddeca Ximenia seed oil. Ellie, can I hand over to you to work through the formulation part of the presentation?
Olá, então vamos lá, né? Depois que a gente observa, né, e vê, né, ver química é um desafio, e muita gente, né, se assusta com os nomes que são difíceis de serem pronunciados, mas quando a gente começa a brincar um pouco com isso e entender como é que isso acontece, né, no espaço, ou seja, o que é esse nome complicado de falar? Ele tem uma forma, ele tem um tamanho, ele tem um desenho, é uma arte isso. E os seres vivos têm uma competência de criar uma química, que o melhor exemplo que acho que eu consigo dizer é como a gente falar de ouro, né? O ouro é um metal nobre. Tem muita diferença olhar para uma pepita bruta, uma barra, ou uma joia altamente refinada, desenhada com todo carinho, que agrega, né, um valor a esse mesmo elemento, e é isso que acontece quando a gente olha para a química que é feita dos seres vivos. E aí eu me lembrei de um questionamento que eu tive, né, que era assim, mas por que você gosta tanto de óleos vegetais e de produtos naturais? Óleo mineral não é o resultado da mistura de tudo isso? Eu disse, então, se a gente olhar só para os elementos, carbono, hidrogênio, oxigênio, é a mesma coisa que a gente pegar, né, um monte de ingredientes para fazer um bolo, socar tudo com casca e tudo, amassar e jogar lá numa frigideira, sei lá, ou a gente usar da arte da combinação. Então, quando a gente olha para essa composição química do óleo de Ximenia, é de uma originalidade, né? Quando a gente percebe ali cadeias com 30 carbonos, 28, 26, 24, quem está acostumado a fazer formulação, e a maioria das melhores formulações, a gente tenta copiar a química que existe na pele, ou que a pele precisa para ter saúde, para ter sobrevivência a esse meio tão agressivo como o Imran nos colocou, né, de substâncias que nós mesmos criamos para nos fazer mal. Então, quando a gente olha, mas o Imran, né, mostrou ali uma imagem de um óleo aparentemente líquido. Como que eu posso ter um óleo, né, com 30 carbonos líquido? Porque ele é insaturado, porque ele é cheio de dobrinhas, porque ele é como aquela joia linda e maravilhosa que transformou aquela pepita bruta numa obra de arte. Então, quando eu falo que ele é uma joia rara, é literalmente uma joia rara. A natureza foi muito caprichosa ao, né, trazer para essa planta esses componentes. E por que é tão importante esses ácidos graxos insaturados? Porque eles são essenciais para a nossa saúde, porque nós não fabricamos isso. Então, precisa vir via nutrição, né? No caso, ou a gente se alimenta via oral, ou a gente passa sobre a pele, a gente repõe. Vamos lembrar que, quando a gente se alimenta, o último órgão a receber benefício é a pele. Então, por isso que os cosméticos são importantes, porque eles repõem mais rapidamente aquilo que é essencial para a defesa da nossa pele. Então, quando a gente olha para o Ximenia, a gente pensa em fazer produtos, né, para cuidados com a microbiota, porque eles são pré-bióticos, eles dão exatamente para a pele as substâncias que a própria pele precisa para se manter em harmonia. É o que a nossa glândula sebácea tenta fazer. Porém, nem sempre a gente tem uma nutrição tão boa, né? Então, a gente precisa complementar. Quando a gente pensa em áreas que se envelhecem mais rápido, como a área dos olhos, como o entorno da boca, né? A área de contorno aqui do pescoço, né? Quando a gente pensa num sérum, que é aquele cosmético que a gente fala, caramba, sérum é como o soro, né? Como na veia, eu tenho uma alta concentração de benefícios que eu vou rapidamente tentar restaurar, que é a umideca, né? Ou seja, esse termo, essa planta tem esse poder de rejuvenescer, né? E a mágica vem dessa química extremamente refinada, extremamente diferenciada. Uma outra coisa que os óleos africanos têm, que me encantam muito, é uma boa concentração de componentes não saponificáveis, ou seja, a maioria ácidos graxos, se eu jogar um álcali, ele vai virar sabão. Agora, tem uma parte ali, né, que os não saponificáveis, que é esses fitoesteróis, que são esqualeno, que são essas riquezas que tornam esse produto, essa matéria-prima, não ativo. A gente indica muito como um ativo quando a gente vai fazer a sugestão de formulação. E como eles têm cadeias longas, a gente está acostumado a trabalhar até a cadeia 22, que é o berrênico, né, do ácido graxo. Aqui a gente vai até cadeia 30, e assim, ó, divididinho, uma pitadinha de cada coisa. Se a gente pudesse fazer um comparativo com uma alimentação, não tem a alta gastronomia? Aqui nós estamos falando da alta cosmetologia. É chique, é refinado, é bacana, né? Cria cosméticos de sensoriais diferenciados. Dá um super trabalho para a gente elaborar o que a gente chama de cascata de emolientes. quando a gente vai tentar copiar a pele. Essa cascata, exatamente, o segredo está nisso, né? Vou contar aqui para vocês. É a gente pegar cadeias pequenas, médias, grandes, e tentar trazer para a pele tudo aquilo que ela precisa. Porque cada uma delas faz uma ação. Umas permeiam mais fácil, outras ficam na superfície, outras fazem, todas essas insaturadas fazem esse papel de anti-inflamatório, né? Que às vezes a gente não tem da própria nutrição e que a gente precisa usar como medicamento. E aí fica a dica, vamos usar como cosmético, né? Vamos repor isso. Quando a gente pensa no rejuvenescimento, né? Lógico, essa questão de evitar a perda de colágeno, e aqui um parênteses, tem muito, mas muito pouco disponível no mercado ativos vegetais que melhoram performance de colágeno. A gente conta assim, ó, nos dedinhos. A grande maioria vem de origem animal. E, nesse momento, o que o mundo lá fora está pedindo é ativos botânicos, né? Os veganos não desejam, não querem isso. E aí, então, a gente tem poucas opções no mercado para colágeno, para elastina, né? Às vezes a gente até tem queratina, algumas coisas assim, mas colágeno é mais difícil da gente achar. E esse produto trata, né? Então, o cabelo fica saudável, porque eu trato desde o couro cabeludo, né? Melhorando todos os processos inflamatórios, e também por ter cadeia longa, eu consigo filmar esse cabelo, eu consigo organizar essas escamas para que elas não fiquem assim, né? Ásperas quando a gente lava. E aí, cabelos, né? Muito crespos, cabelos que têm química, e quem é que é do sexo feminino que não tem uma química no cabelo nesse mundo, né? A gente conta também assim nos dedinhos. O próximo, Irã, por favor. E aí, olhando um pouquinho, né, a gente vai deixar aqui duas formulações de sugestões, depois, se vocês quiserem, a gente envia para vocês, né, esse conteúdo, vai estar lá gravado também no YouTube, mostrando um pouquinho, né, que tem marcas no mundo já colocando como claim, como destaque, Ximenia Oil, né? Ele sozinho, eu vi vários, né? Alguns vendidos como sérum em conta-gotas, alguns em creme, como uma bisnaguinha, Body Shop falando de um produto que tem também esfoliante, mas que tem esse apelo rejuvenescedor, e quando a gente olha, né, para esse óleo, né, de reversão da idade, porque cabelo envelhece também, né? Não fica só branquinho, fica fino, fica frágil, fica quebradiço. E aí, qual que é a intenção de estar mostrando essas formulações? Com poucos componentes, a gente consegue fazer um produto top, né? E é isso que o mundo está nos pedindo hoje. Multifuncionalidade, simplicidade, e aquilo, qual que é o melhor cliente? A própria pele. O que a pele vai ficar feliz se receber? Pode acreditar, Ximenia, ela vai gostar, tá? Não é só propaganda, não. É essa química da vida da pele que o Ximenia corresponde, né? Então, a gente pega aqui uma formulação. O que a gente fez? A gente pegou o Cosfaderm Fio, que é um éster também orgânico, natural, de cadeia bem pequenininha, 7 carbonos. Absorve rápido, então ele passa a ser o veículo, né? A gente usa muito esse componente quando a gente quer fazer uma formulação orgânica, vegetal, e eu quero substituir silicone volátil. E aí a gente entra com o Ximenia de cadeias a partir do 16, né? Com muita composição e insaturados. Então, quando eu junto esses dois, isso torna... É como eu pegar em silicone, né? Um silicone de cadeia maior, para deixar mais macio, para dar aquele sensorial, papapá, e o silicone volátil para não ficar tão graxo. A gente pôs na sugestão o Cosfaderm Itaprimix, que é um blend natural de vitamina C e vitamina E, né, e lecitina, então isso ajuda na própria manutenção da formulação, como durabilidade e ação antioxidante, e um conservante. Tudo natural, ou seja, com 4 itens a gente faz um produto muito top, né? E o Ximenia entrando como um ativo, né? Como a gente está falando em cabelo, a gente quer realmente que sobre um pouco desse sobreengorduramento para que esse fio fique maleável, isso para um cabelo mais seco, mais longo. Ah, não, meu cabelo é mais fino, aí a gente vai adequando as concentrações, né? E aqui, com a mesma proposta, né, de reversão de idade, a gente está pensando num creme onde a gente pode usar o Ximenia como um ativo. Tá? Então, eu pego uma base creme simples, um gel creme, o que eu quiser, como dependendo, né, para que idade, para quem eu vou direcionar esse produto. A mesma duplinha lá, né? Estou pegando o Ximenia como ativo, colocando um pouco do Cosfadermifil, que tem esse sensorial mais seco, mais curto um pouco, o Cosfaderm Tapmix, que é o antioxidante para a própria formulação, e aí a gente entra para agregar, né, um outro valor também que caminha junto com o Ximenia, que a gente, esse ativo é colocado na fase aquosa, que é o Pululan, né, que vai fazer, quando a gente aplica o produto, o tal do efeito Cinderela, né, que no primeiro momento o Pululan polímero faz essa puxadinha, e o uso contínuo com o Ximenia vai garantindo a manutenção do colágeno, e aí a gente consegue entregar um produto de rejuvenescimento real. Era isso que eu queria para falar, e é dizer que a gente volta aqui no finalzinho para responder as perguntas de vocês. Obrigado, Imran, pela oportunidade.
Thanks, Ilya. So I think the very last slide that I'd like to share with you in the last few minutes that I have with you is that I'd like to give you a very short overview of the long and complicated supply chain that we that we have put in place to be able to bring Mydéca Ximenia to market, and in particular to our Brazilian friends and customers. We effectively run 5 core processes that touch 9 countries to make the batch market ready. Primarily, Ximenia grows from our sourcing perspective out of Zimbabwe. You can see down here where my cursor is. We're sitting here, I'm sitting here in particular in South Africa, in Johannesburg. When we have our seed batch collected, ready to go, the consignment goes out through to Beira port in Mozambique. The seeds are then transported by sea from Beira all the way up into Hamburg, which is our operational hub out of Europe. We perform cold pressing of the oil, like I mentioned earlier, in a very specialist facility in Austria using a very, although it's cold pressing, it is a specialist technique that they are using and they've actually developed for us. That oil then comes back to Hamburg. From there, it goes across to France for refining. This is a product that we've spent about 12 to 13 months in R&D, both on the cold pressing side and on the refining side, to be able to really give a fantastic product to preserve the long chain fatty acids. Once the refining is completed, the product comes back to our warehouse in Hamburg and sits ready and available. That entire process respects, as I mentioned, organic certification as well as the Cosmos approved standards and accreditations. Finally, the quality assurance and quality control, in fact, takes place across a number of areas. Testing is performed in France, Germany, and Greece. We then have the batch release and sign off. And finally, samples are produced in the UK to be able to be sent out to our international distributors, including Colormix, to be able to then provide for you. Of course, as I mentioned, our stock is all available out of Hamburg, and Colormix is completely aware of the processes around being able to bring the material into Brazil. So with that, I would be more than happy to take any questions through whether it's directly from Iliani or perhaps from the audience from the webinar.
Vamos aqui. Já temos algumas perguntas, mas vamos deixar também um espaço aqui para quem está conosco, se quiser fazer via o Q&A ou no chat, né? Mas enquanto isso, vou falando as que chegaram aqui para a gente, de perguntas que vieram do Instagram e do YouTube. A primeira delas, Imran, é se este óleo, né, o de Ximenia, se essa planta que o produz é de alguma região específica da África, de algum lugar específico.
Not a specific place. There are so the plant is or the fruit, the tree itself is collected wild harvest. Now, naturally through wild harvest, there are belts of regions of the same trees that can stretch anywhere from 10 meters to several kilometers. So this is a wild harvest plant, and it's grown scattered through different regions, as I mentioned earlier, anywhere from Senegal across to Ethiopia in the north, and it stretches sporadically without any real configuration down to Zimbabwe. There may be a few trees kind of in the northern parts of South Africa, but very few. It largely stops with a fairly high concentration of the trees in Zimbabwe, which is our primary source.
Ok, obrigada. A segunda pergunta é se esse óleo tem algum aroma específico, marcante, alguma identificação que o diferencia, enfim.
Well, the oil, I'm just opening up the oil itself, just to maybe kept it obviously nice and tight. If I smell it, it's got a very light odor. So it's certainly there. We also, as part of the refining process, we haven't killed off the odor entirely because we had to balance the long chain fatty acids, which give the viscosity, against some of the color, the odor, and some of the peroxide level considerations. But going back to your question, Ellie, it has a very low but very characteristic odor. It's certainly a pleasant odor. It's not like neem. It's not like neem oil, which is right in your face and very off-putting. It is a pleasant odor. I think it would work very nicely with those that want to maintain a natural cosmetics offering without bringing in externalities in the formulation. So if you were to go with this, absolutely, I think it would work quite well. But certainly, if you do want to create your own odor profile as part of the finished cosmetics formulation, there isn't that much work to be done.
Obrigada. Outra pergunta. Ele pode ser considerado como um ativo cosmético na formulação? Pela riqueza das propriedades, assim, né, dos componentes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I mentioned in one of the slides, if you kind of break it down into the core components, the first level of activity arises from the phytosterol profile. As I mentioned, the three key phytosterols, the beta-sitosterol, amaryl, lupriol, they come up with up to around 80% of the phytosterol profile, and they are very unique, very rare when it comes to vegetable oils. You certainly get them in vegetable oils, but not at that level of concentration. And it's that rarity and the combination together is the first part of why the oil is indeed an active oil. The other part to it, as I mentioned, is the very unique fatty acid profile. It's not only the concentrations, but it's specifically the types of fatty acids that are available. So as I mentioned, one of them obviously is that long chain that exists from lignoceric onwards, C24 onwards. Behenic, for example, you do get in moringa oil and perhaps a few other oils, but certainly when it comes to the C24 onwards, that's certainly not there. So it's not only the long chain fatty acids, but the specific fatty acids like Ximenic fatty acid, which bring that microcirculatory activity. Again, you don't find these fatty acids in the concentrations that you've seen in the oil generally available. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You'll find a sunflower oil product where Ximenic fatty acid is added into the oil, right? So that's obviously a manipulation or a manufacturing of the end product. This is a natural product coming from nature.
Uma joia, uma joia.
Absolutely, absolutely. We think Ellie, you may have seen the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It's a movie from about 10 years ago where the child is born as an old man, and as he lives, he gets younger and dies as a baby.
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt. That's it. This is Brad Pitt's secret.
Brad Pitt, Jóia. Oh.
Indeed, indeed.
É verdade.
I wasn't supposed to tell anybody, but sorry, I've let the secret out.
Precisa indicar ele para Angelina Jolie. Ok. Estou perdida aqui. Se existe uma comparação, algum estudo feito por vocês, dele, em termos de sensorial, com silicones, né? Porque essa grande concentração de cadeias longas e insaturadas, que deixa essa molécula bem aberta, né? Vocês precisam pegar o óleo para sentir. Ele lembra, gente, um elastômero. Quando você passa, claro que tem silicone, tem uma outra composição, não é igual, né? Mas aquela riqueza de substantividade que o elastômero de silicone tem, esse óleo promove para a pele, né? Então, se vocês já fizeram algum comparativo sobre essa indicação ou essa substituição por silicones?
We haven't done a study from that perspective. As I said, the study that we have done has been on the efficacy of anti-aging and collagen protection. That's been our priority to start with, given the extensive data that we had from an academic source. I think that the data that we do have is more anecdotal data. Before we launched the product, we did send samples out to a few of our distributors. We did ask them to share the samples with some of their key close customers that we could get some genuine feedback in case we needed to change the manufacturing approach and therefore the resulting product. And so, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. And that's why I mentioned during the presentation, we have a lot of strong interest, a lot of formulation activity that's already happening as a result of the oil and the textural element of the oil, the silicone or the jelly-like feel. So we don't have a formal study per se, but we have got very good feedback. And these are customers that are fairly well-known brands in the industry. So it's more expert judgment and feedback that we've been working on.
Sim, e só a gente pegando, né, e passando na mão, que a gente percebe realmente é diferente, tem um diferencial. E aí tem uma pergunta relacionada, se existe muita diferença, né, eu acho que você já respondeu, mas entre o óleo de Ximenia e os outros óleos africanos, o moringa, o manquete, né, se você puder responder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the non-technical description that I would give is that our other 5 oils are significantly less viscous and more runny. You tip it out of the bottle, you'll see it come out quite naturally. This is more jelly-like, so it comes out slower. It comes together rather than as a runny liquid. And I think this is what really characterizes the difference and is reconciled by the fatty acid profile, especially the long chain profile that it does have. So it certainly feels very different.
Ok. Tem que experimentar.
The viscosity is fairly high. It depends on the measure, but it's part of our spec sheet. So I think it's probably better to pass that out rather than just work through that. It's a relative measure, yeah.
Ok, mas vou deixar uma...
No, this one is more jelly-like, more viscous, more jelly-like.
Viscoso.
This is also called our Destiny's Child oil. Are you ready for the jelly? You may know the Destiny's Child song. This is our jelly. This is our Beyonce song, Beyonce oil, as well as our Brad Pitt oil.
Esse é um óleo hollywoodiano.
Hollywood oil, indeed. Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutamente. Sucesso. Tem uma pergunta de um cliente, se o Imran me permitir, que é bem especificamente técnica, que ele é um cliente que está fazendo, desculpa, um óleo para bronzeamento, de alto bronzeamento, né? E aí ele usa um ativo que se chama DHA. Então, é bem específico isso. Se o Imran quiser, eu posso responder. Ele está perguntando se ele quiser adicionar o óleo de Ximenia nessa formulação, se teria alguma incompatibilidade, né? Então, se você me permite, Imran, de eu responder, porque é um assunto bem específico.
Please, okay. Ellie, I think you're more qualified than I am.
Então, vamos lá. Esse ativo, o DHA, ele é um ativo bastante instável, vamos dizer, né? Então, se a sua formulação está estabilizada com o DHA, não vai ser o óleo de Ximenia que vai, né, desestabilizar. O que eu sugeriria para você, se você lida com isso, é que isso pode se transformar numa linha, né? Então, eu posso ter também um produto para passar depois. E como o Ximenia faz filme, é protetor, ele vai te ajudar a manter essa coloração e a saúde da pele por mais tempo. Tudo bem? Concorda, Imran?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Então, tá bom. Tem uma outra pergunta, como tem cadeia... Como tem cadeias longas, a pessoa está perguntando se em dias frios fica mais difícil para ele ter uma viscosidade um pouco maior de trabalhar com ele. Esse é o questionamento.
In cold days, there is more solidity of the oil, obviously temperature driven. But I think it's, you know, the solidity obviously goes fairly quickly once you put the oil into a hot water bath to loosen the bonds. So obviously production at higher temperatures would also make sense to be able to work through the bond and allow that to infuse into the formulation.
Sim, e a gente está, né, dias frios, né, vamos pensar em Brasil, a gente não tem dias, com muitos dias abaixo de 0 de temperatura e muitos dias em algumas regiões, mas o fato dessas cadeias longas serem insaturadas, vamos dizer, facilita a não solidificação, né, ajuda, então ele fica mais gelatinoso, como ele falou, do que sólido, do que, né, barrinhas, manteiguinha. Correct? Okay.
Correct, absolutely. It's not it's more jelly rather than a solid. You know, you can't throw it against the wall and catch it. It's jelly.
Que mais? Espera aí. Tem uma pergunta. Se for usado num produto para cabelo, né, se ele é tão bom de sensorial, quando lá aplicado lá no banho com o cabelo molhado, ou se esse sensorial bom de maciez permanece depois também no cabelo seco. Depois que está seco, né? Depois que seca. Yes?
I believe so. I haven't gone into, that length. I do know that one of the prospective customers that we did trial the product with was actually a hair care customer. And they were also looking at using our Mydeka Ximenia seed oil in a hair gel product. And while I don't have full visibility of what the specific outcomes were, they were actually quite impressed with the product. I think it was both at leave-on. I don't know if it was wet hair or dry hair, but certainly after about 12 hours. So that was unfortunately the high-level result that I had. The specifics, I don't have the details around it.
Ok. São essas as perguntas que nós recebemos. Não sei se alguém aqui dos presentes gostaria de fazer mais algum questionamento.
Thank you very much. Ellie, thank you to you and the full Color Mix team, and also to the audience for the opportunity to present and launch our product together in the Brazilian market. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I think it's great to be really bringing this product to Brazil. There's obviously a connection between Africa and Brazil, given the history and the migration of population and so forth. So certainly I have every confidence that our Mydeka Ximenia oil, as well as the other oils that we have in our portfolio, will really resonate with the Brazilian and the more broader South American market.
Nós agradecemos e, como sempre, estamos à disposição de vocês, né, que estão com algum projeto, buscando alguma originalidade, uma joia rara mesmo. Toda a equipe de Ciências da Vida, né, da Color Mix Especialidades, adora, né, abraçar os projetos com vocês, desde a ideia do início, a gente vai para a bancada junto, e o que vocês precisarem da gente, nós estamos à disposição. No Instagram, né, @colormix.especialidades, no site www.colormix.net.br, e as pessoas que já me conhecem, quiserem me achar lá no Instagram, é @e_dornelas. Estamos aqui, sempre à disposição, e agradecemos a presença de todos vocês. Obrigada.